The 7800X3D is a solid S tier. I have some friends who have it, and they love it for VRChat and actually all games in general. But the 7900X3D and the 7950X3D, they have some quirks/problems. So later on in the video, I'm going to red pill you on them and tell you if they're also an S tier or if they're not. Anyway, the 7800X3D, it has the same 8 cores and the same L3 cache as the 5800X3D. And if you watched my last video, then you know that that CPU was S tier. And that's because one of the most important things a CPU needs for VRChat, and a lot of VR games in general, is a large L3 cache. And AMD's X3D series is the only series that has a 96 megabyte minimum. Intel's most expensive desktop CPU, it doesn't even reach 36 megabytes of L3 cache. So yeah, Intel is kind of trash. Anyway, the 7800X3D, it improves on a 5800X3D by having much higher clock speeds. It actually goes from a boost clock of 4.5 to 5.0. And it also uses a more modern motherboard and RAM, so you get speed improvements there too. And because they're more modern and faster, they're gonna cost more at first, but that is actually a good thing. So let me explain. So the next 2 generations of AMD processors, they're going to support the same motherboard and RAM as the 7000 series today. So if you make a computer with a 7800X3D today, then a couple years down the line, you can get 9800X3D or 9950X3D, whatever you want your like final build to be, and then you can stay on that for like 3 or 5 years. And I literally did this strategy on the last generation of processors. I made a whole new computer with a 3900X, and then years later, I just took it out, and then I upgraded to a 5800X3D. It was really easy. It was basically like switching the game card on a Switch. So because you have such an easy upgrade path, this is the main reason I'm putting the 7800X3D in S tier. Also, it's just really fast. If you're wondering which RAM to buy, I recommend 2 sticks of 16 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM at 6400 megahertz and C32 latency. So you could technically get faster speeds by buying RAM with a higher megahertz number or a lower C number, but honestly, there's not going to be that much difference. So next, I want to talk about the 7950X3D. So we have a lot to talk about this, so I'm not going to place it just yet. First of all, it has double the cores, going from 8 to 16. And it has an even higher boost clock, going from 5.0 to 5.7, and that's pretty insane, by the way. But it's possible that you can't actually unlock all the power of the processor. So now we're going to get a little advanced because I'm going to explain one of the problems with the processor using diagrams. So it's going to be like a college lecture. So this is pretty much what the 7800X3D looks like on the inside. Just ignore the pink box. This black square over here, it's called a CCD, and that's where all the cores and the normal cache are. So when I say the 7800X3D has 8 cores, all of them are actually located inside this black box. And this rainbow on top, it symbolizes the 3D V cache. And it's called 3D V cache because it's literally on top of the cores. The 3D V cache was the first time a company ever built vertically instead of just horizontally, so that's why it's called a 3D V cache. So yeah, that's how the 7800X3D works, but the 7950 is a lot different. It looks like this. It has a 16-core CPU, so that's why there's 2 black boxes. Each one has 8 cores. But look, only one of them has the rainbow, meaning only half the cores has a 3D V cache, and that can be a really big problem. Because think about it, if there's only one black box, then it's really easy to use a V cache, because, well, it's just always there. But if there's 2 black boxes, you need extra instructions to tell your computer to only use the rainbow side during games. And outside of games, you want to use both sides, because clock speeds are actually much faster in the side without a rainbow. So if that sounds complicated, it is complicated, and the computer didn't always listen. Like when they first launched the 7900X3D and the 7950X3D, it was like completely broken. People were spending hundreds of more dollars to get these upgraded processors, but it would end up using the side without a rainbow during games, or it would just get confused and it would just crash, and it was just wasting people's money. So now, in this video, it's almost 2024. Did they fix this problem? Well, I asked my friends in VRChat who do have this processor, and they said, yeah, it's fixed. If you use some launch commands in Steam and also some external programs, then it knows to use the rainbow side of the processor all the time during games. So that means during games, you can have really good performance, and outside of games, you get to use both sides of the processor. So you'll have all 16 cores going at a really fast speed. So that means now, in almost 2024, the 7950X3D is truly the best of both worlds when it works. But because it's possible that it might not work out the box, and you might need to tweak it down the line, I can't really put it in S tier with a good conscience. I have to put it in the A tier. But if you're good with computers and you know how to use Steam launch commands and stuff, then I say go for it. My friends really like the 7950X3D, and I'm sure you can figure it out. So the 7900X3D, it kind of sucks, but I'm going to put it in B tier. So you know how the 7950 has 2 black boxes and they have 8 cores each? Well, the boxes on the 7900X3D, they have 6 cores each. And like the upgraded version, only one of the boxes has the rainbow on it. So that means in a game that can only use the rainbow side of the processor, like you're going to only have 6 cores. So it's possible that it could be weaker than the cheaper 7800 X3D, which has 8 cores on the Rainbow side. So you could possibly be paying more money for less performance, and that really sucks. So does this apply to VRChat and VR games in general? I think that, yeah, it does. There's a possibility that your 7900 X3D could be slower than your 7800 X3D. Because VR games are not bound to a single core, they know how to use multi-core. So the fact that each black box only has 6 cores, it could be a problem. And on top of that, imagine if your CPU bugs out, and then it doesn't even use the Rainbow side. In that case, you'll be playing a game with only 6 cores and no V-cache. And it's just going to be absolutely horrible. And this actually happened to someone I know on launch. But despite all this, my friends say that now, in almost 2024, your computer will probably always use the Rainbow side if you tweak it and use Steam launch commands or use external programs. So yeah, you could make this work. And also, since the 7900 X3D is such like an unwanted processor, I think that they're going to lower the price. So you could possibly buy it as like a really good deal on a 12-core CPU that also has the option to use V-cache. So that's why I have it in the B tier. I would never recommend it over anything in the S tier or the A tier, but it exists, and that's the best thing I can say about it. It exists. So next up is the 5800 X3D. Last time I had it in the S tier, and this time, I still have it in the S tier. So right now, they're in the middle of trying to sell all these and focus everything on the 7000 series. That's why in the summer, it was on sale new for less than $300. I paid over $500 for mine at launch, and it was completely worth it. So you can imagine how good $300 is. Unlike the 7000 series CPU, it uses motherboards from 3 years ago, and it also uses DDR4 RAM, which makes it really, really cheap. So this means that like you can get close to the best VRChat experience possible for very little money. And I literally use this processor every day for VRChat, so I fully stand behind my opinion. Other than that, there's not really much else to say. If there was a downside, I guess it would be that there's no room to upgrade. Unlike the 7000 series, which uses a motherboard that will support the 8000 and the 9000 series, that are guaranteed to come out in the coming years. But I don't know, is that like even a downside? Like by now, we know that the technology behind the 5800 X3D, it's mature, it's affordable, it's reliable, and it's proven. So if you want to get into VRChat, or maybe all VR games in general for cheap, then you don't need to think, you don't need to debate, you don't need to research any longer. Just get a 5800 X3D and call it a day. The RAM I recommend is two 16GB sticks of DDR4 RAM with 3200 MHz speed and C16 latency. It's dirt cheap, it's fast, and it won't let you down. The link to buy it and other CPUs mentioned in the video are in the description and the comments. If you do make a purchase, I get a couple percent and it costs you nothing extra. So that's nice. So next, let's talk about the newest 5000 series CPU, the 5600 X3D. So not many people know about this, but look, it's in the S tier. So if you've never heard of it, it's basically a 5800 X3D, but it's cut down to 6 cores from 8. But it still has the same massive, game-changing 96 megabytes of L3 cache. And it only costs $230 at full price, which is pretty insane. But that's not all. Since it's new, they're selling it in bundles with motherboards and RAM, so you could save even more money. And you're still going to get the best-in-class performance in VRChat. But there's a catch. You can only buy it at Micro Center. So if you don't live near a Micro Center, then too bad. You just can't get it. Also, having only 6 cores compared to 8 is actually much slower in productivity. According to this benchmark by Gamers Nexus, rendering the same scene in Blender took 30% longer on the 5600 X3D compared to the 5800 X3D. So if you're doing any sort of professional or semi-professional work, I would never ever get the CPU. But if you just want to play games, then you really can't go wrong with this price. So next up is Intel's 13th generation of CPUs. So like I mentioned before, the most expensive CPU they have, it only has 36 megabytes of Smart Cache. And what is Smart Cache? Smart Cache is Intel's sneaky way of combining L2 and L3 cache together. Yeah, they literally fudge the numbers. But AMD's cheapest CPU on this tier list, the 5600 X3D, it has 96 megabytes of L3 cache alone, so that's not even including L2 cache. And considering how amazingly important the L3 cache is important for VRChat and many games in general, I can't recommend Intel's 13th generation of CPUs at all. So Intel CPUs are going in the trash tier. And let's just put the Intel 12th generation here too. God, I just really hate Intel so much. I'm not going to talk about them anymore. They're just trash. Just never buy Intel, okay? I just hate them. So next, let's talk about the Quest 3, which is kind of outside the scope of the video, but hear me out. If you don't want to build a whole computer, which is kind of expensive, you can just get the Quest 3, which is coming out later this year. You'll be able to play VRChat using only the wireless headset and nothing else. And also, compared to the Quest 2, the CPU is massively upgraded, so you're going to have a much better experience. In my opinion, it's really not a bad choice for $500. It has everything you need, and it's wireless, and it charges through USB, like, I don't know. Not a bad way to play VRChat. But the downside is that there's a lot of worlds and avatars that are PC only, and you're not going to be able to see them if you're just on the Quest by itself. But later, when you get a gaming desktop or a gaming laptop, you can connect your Quest 3 to it, and then you can play on all the PC only worlds and avatars. So there's kind of like an upgrade path. So next, let's talk about the Quest 2, just really quickly. So it's really old and it's really weak, but it just works. And a lot of people, I think most people actually are playing on Quest 2 right now. More than PC, actually. and you can get it for like $300 new or like $200 something refurbished, and you can even get it like lightly used on like Facebook Marketplace for like $100 something. I think it's a great way to try VR, and you can even connect it to your computer to get access to all the PC only worlds and avatars in VRChat. If you don't have a computer to connect it to, I would just wait for the Quest 3 because it's going to have a much stronger CPU, but the Quest 3 is going to cost $500 minimum, so you know, trade-offs. Anyway, you can get it for like $100 something. I think you can put it here. So next up is the Nintendo 3DS. Did you know it could play VRChat? So that's why we're going to put it in the C tier, above Intel. God, I hate Intel. So next up is Potato. Did you know Potato can generate an electric charge? It's true. So after you're done utilizing Potato for VR, you can actually eat it. So that's why I'm putting it above Intel. And lastly, we have Water Wheel. Ever since Roman times, people harnessed the motion of the water to do things such as mill grain. Milling grain is really useful, so I'm going to put it down here, above Intel. I have Water Wheel under Potato because you need a river to run Water Wheel, and not everyone has a river. Whereas Potato can basically use anywhere. It's more flexible. So let me know in the comments if this video was helpful. If you think I'm really stupid and this is the most biased tier list ever, then also let me know in the comments. If you want to know more VRChat tips and tricks, as well as the best gear to buy for VRChat, then like and subscribe. See you guys next week.